Okay, so welcome to the monthly joint ontology call, Wednesday, April 28th, and we've got a few agenda items here. Lauren and Liliana leading off with the vitamin schema for CHEBI. As well, I wanted to plug a little OvaFoundry tagging suggestion for our ontologies, and then into a review of the ingredient recipe formulation document, a few other issues if we can get to them. So let's see who's on. Liliana is on and Lauren are on. So would you guys like to lead off with talking about the issue with respect to CHEBI? And I can
Sure.
start.
Yep. Thank you, Damien. Sorry, I just need to, I'm gonna share screen.
Can I, let me see. Yep, great.
Can you see the slide? Okay, so I'm just gonna give a brief introduction to the Cdno. Because I think it's important so we understand a bit of the issue we have with vitamins. So yeah, so we are changing the crop. So before it was the crop dietary nutrition ontology, but we are probably changing to compositional dietary nutrition ontology. And it's an issue that I will just explain a little bit further. But first, I would like to mention that the first release of the Cdno wouldn't have been possible without the hard work of a lot of people that was involved within the process. Especially without, I wouldn't have done it without Ramona Walls, Kai Blomberg, and of course, Damien. That helps to create some of or integrate the plant food products and food material process into Foodon for the specific use case that we were working with. And also the incredible feedback from the people from the InFoods USA Food Data Central and Eurofear that helped us during the classification of the dietary nutritional components that were people from this group, such as Tarini Naravane and Naomi Fukawaga, that provide us with feedback as well to create the classification of the dietary nutritional components. So just a little bit of background. I'm just going to mention that the dietary nutritional data available has been deposited in different databases, such as spreadsheets, publications, including supplementary data, which is often inconsistent and poorly integrated. Some of these sources involve, for example, the Food Data Central, the FAO International Food Composition Table Database Directory, which is InFoods. And these ones sometimes do not include variation within crop species. And also they are not cultivar specific. And the key macronutrients are often underreported or with no functional information. So there was a need for an ontology that could manage dietary nutritional information probably taken from these specific resources that we already have, specifically for plants, but also for other organisms. So in a review that we published last year, we found that just a few ontologies provide comprehensive representation of dietary nutritional information, and most of them do not appear to be effectively managed, updated, or easily accessible, such as some of these ones. Also, some other ontologies lack specificity in the tailored subclassification of terms within classes, or on the opposite side, they have an exhaustive level of granularity between the terms, such as CHEBI, which contains, for example, I think it has like 140,000 terms associated with molecular entities and biosynthesis. So which is actually great. CHEBI is a great source for chemical entities, but it's actually more information than what is required for dietitians readers. So we could see here in this image that to get to glucose, we have 12 levels, where like we could like just get chemical entity, carbohydrate, monosaccharide, exos, aldoexos, and glucose, or even less. So although CHEBI contains an exhaustive level of granularity across the classification of the chemical compounds, as we can see in the image, it represents a starting point map or reuse semantically equivalent chemical or nutritional compounds to represent the existing dietary nutritional information. So so that's why we created, or the reason we created, the Workgroup Dietary Nutrition Ontology. So the Cdno started as an ontology to provide structured terminologies to describe nutritional attributes for crop plants and their harvested materials that contribute to human diet. So the Cdno has been initially designed at 3 major classes, which is the dietary nutritional component, the nutritional component concentration, and the dietary function. The dietary function hasn't been released just yet because we are still working on it. And I think people from here might help us a lot as well to clarify all the different hierarchies and the classification that we have. So I think at some point I will just come back and maybe we can discuss about the classification that we have. So the dietary function class will have, or will describe just briefly physical or other attributes, such as anti-nutritional factors, food toxins, antioxidants, and for example, allergies, or even like other dietary functions like flatulence, or yeah, like some of these specific terms that haven't been described fully in any other ontology, but it's necessary to clarify them. So today I'm just gonna describe 2 of the main classes that we have at the moment. So the first one is the dietary nutritional component, and this one was created primarily, is the primary class from Cdno, and it has 10 subclasses, as we can see here: ash, carbohydrate, dry plant matter, lipid, etc. So all the terms describing within these subclasses containing hierarchical sets of terms organized to reflect commonly used classifications of chemical food composition. So this class does not represent an exhaustive classification of chemical components, but focuses on structuring terms accordingly to a widely accepted categories in nutrition. So these terms were created by reusing some terms, or reusing terms from CHEBI and some others from EMBO, such as ash. And some others were created specifically in Cdno. So the next class is the nutritional component concentration. And the terms were developed leveraging the 519 terms from the dietary nutritional component from Cdno with the same hierarchies. And they were designed to be used with datasets that quantify concentration of chemical nutritional components derived from plant samples through the crop production and food supply chain. However, feedback since so I just want to highlight that we reuse terms from PATO for the concentration of, and then reuse the 500 terms from CNO. And then at the end, we created a pre-composed terms using plant structure to create the terms in the crop world. But after we released the CDNO recently, feedback from the different people, has been highlighted that maybe we can actually reuse these terms for other specific organisms or non-organisms. So for example, this could be equally valuable for a wider range of organisms, for example, like beef steak or langoustine soup, or something like that, or non-organismal like table salt, for example, food materials through the processing and food supply chain. So now the crop dietary nutrition ontology will change to compositional dietary nutrition ontology. So we decided to change the design patterns of these specific terms. So actually just changing the plant structure that we were reusing, the term that we were reusing from plant ontology for material entities. So in this way, we are expecting to maybe provide a wider range of terms that can be reused for other people as well. And just so you know as well, like now the Cdno in the specific class, which is the concentration class, has been associated the cross references to inputs in USDA as well. So you can actually search for those tag names and code numbers in OLS, and then you will find the specific terms associated for those specific tag names and code numbers. So I think this is it for the quick and brief introduction for the Cdno. And now I just want to highlight the issue that we were checking with Lauren. Lauren, do you want to explain the issue or do you want me to just do it?
Sure, I can give a couple tidbits
Yep.
here. So right now on the screen is kind of a breakdown of the vitamin hierarchy as it exists in CHEBI. And so this all came up because I was interested in seeing where vitamins were kind of living, if it was going to be in Cdno or if it was going to be in food on. And it seems as though they are going to live in Cdno, utilize CHEBI terms, and then be ingested into food on. So they're all kind of unified in some fashion, but they're in theory going to be housed for their dietary nutritional aspects in Cdno. And so because Cdno is ingesting in CHEBI terms, we kind of are also inheriting, it seems, the status as to whether or not they're considered a chemical entity or if they're considered a role. And so between all of the different vitamins that we have listed here, there's kind of some discrepancy within CHEBI as to whether or not they're using ISA relationships and considering the term in question to be a chemical entity that can be referred to in patterns that use chemical entity and things like that, or if they're having the relationship of has role, where they're referring to the thing that they're stating, which seems to be a chemical entity, but they're actually considering it a role, which means that it isn't suitable for patterns that utilize chemical entities as the source item. And it kind of just makes things a little bit fuzzy as to what we should expect to be an entity and what we should expect to be a role that an entity would serve. So we were hopefully, I think, looking for some feedback as to what kind of makes the most sense and what's the most useful for us to have these terms listed either as roles or as entities to just make it more functional for people who are actually utilizing these terms in the food and nutrition community. So it seems as though in CHEBI there could be just these discrepancies are very strange and they don't seem to have any rhyme or reason. So it feels as though they might have just been overlooked or could be small mistakes. So we just were hoping to kind of come to a unified agreement as to what would be best for all of us who are the people that in theory actually use these terms for nutritional pieces, and then come back to CHEBI and propose some changes on their side of things. If CHEBI is not super excited about making changes, we can also do the changes just within Cdno and utilize that. But it would be nice for us to have a unified front as to how we approach these terms.
And there's,
Yeah.
I'll just comment that in the ovofoundry family of ontologies, since ontologies are reusing each other, the moment they reuse some of the upper level hierarchies that these terms are organized under, especially if they're using BFO as a unifying upper level ontology, they literally run into errors and contradictions when reasoners are run on these ontologies. And that's what I was trying to expose in the food on curation group by showing how literally the CHEBI role hierarchy, I cannot situate it within the BFO role point in its hierarchy without running into a logical contradiction, precisely because a term is being used as a role and a material entity at the same time. And that's a no-go. So and unfortunately with CHEBI at the moment, you look at in their role hierarchy and the way they've defined and labeled a lot of these things makes them look like material entities rather than roles that chemicals can be attached to with that has-role relationship. And consequently, they're being misused out there in databases as material entities. Occasionally, somebody from the ovofoundry world sort of gives a little bit of a warning about that to the rest of the community. But I feel like this initiative that Lauren and Liliana are organizing provides the, perhaps for the first time, provides nutritionalist user feedback directly to CHEBI. So I suspect this request is going to carry a lot more weight than some of the comments that I might have made on the CHEBI support list. But so the more that you folks can grill this as nutritionalists and biochemists, the better.
Yeah. So there are some, for example, it's vitamin B and vitamin C. They have is-a relationship as water-soluble vitamin. And then vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and K has role fat-soluble vitamin. So I was actually wondering if maybe that was a nutritional explanation of like why these two have is-a, and then the other ones have has role to this first hierarchy. But then some of the other ones have, for example, B9 folate have both is-a and has role B vitamin. So yeah, ascorbic acid has role vitamin C, but some of the other ones, vitamin A, vitamin D, they all have is-a relationship to the vitamin A or vitamin D. So at the moment in Cdno, what I did was just to create is-a relationship and remove all the has role. But I'm not quite sure if maybe we can use some other type of hierarchies, even like just using vitamins and without in removing the specific name of the vitamin. But I'm not quite sure. I feel like this group might be helpful for that, maybe.
Yeah, it's just one other comment. It's okay to have a superclass say that it has a superclass of chemical, say that it has a role, some vitamin. That role is then inherited by all the subordinate classes. But for every role that exists, one can name a class of material entity that has that role. And I think most of the time, people, when they're referring to these chemicals, they'd like to refer to them as material entities and have it known that they are a member of a class that is a material entity or has a role, some vitamin. So it's like they need to, I think it's most approachable for this whole list to be material entities rather than roles, except at the high level that some of those material entities have a role. So as part of the proposal that the water-soluble vitamin and the fat-soluble vitamin that those be role classes. You have Usda. Let me get my bearings here. Is water soluble vitamin a role or a material entity class right now?
It's a role.
So the water soluble vitamin has a role or is a role. Let me look that
I
up.
think all of them they are like has role. I mean, they don't have a role at the moment. They just are like has role or ISA.
Okay, let's just see.
Hi, Liliana.
Hi.
Sorry. Perhaps we can simplify this simply by having a list of roles. I want to say, and just superclass as Damien said, and then the list of entities themselves. I think it is what you mean, Damien.
You like
I mean a list of roles such as a fat-soluble vitamin role or water-soluble vitamin role, but not direct relation between the entities and the role. You know, I don't know how to say that. Sorry.
Okay.
It's so easy in English for me. Sorry.
I think we can probably try to share this sheet with whoever wants to make probably like maybe a proposal. That could be good, and then we can all like check on that. What do you think, Lauren? I think that could be an option.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good plan. I think for me, it's just trying to understand, like, if you were a user of these terms, would you want to be able to use these terms as an entity? Like, would that be a valuable thing for you as a user versus, because in my mind, I guess when I even things like water soluble vitamin, I could see there being application of that as an entity as opposed to just a role. So if we are needing all of these as entities, then, you know, kind of what do we do to create some sort of role terms for this hierarchy? So just generally anything that has to do with how you might use it as to what you would want as entity, what you'd want as a role is helpful information. And yeah, if you have any recommendations as to how best to approach this, that would be very helpful, because I think it just generally is a little muddy right now, and I'm a little confused as to if CHEBI actually has any rhyme or reason as to why they do things in a specific fashion for this, since it's so inconsistent.
Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm just colorizing the terms that are roles right now, so that you can see at a glance which thing is a material entity and which is a role. That way, you'll see where the contradictions are a bit. So B vitamin and vitamin C are roles at the moment. And I'm in favor of, by default, having a material entity group. It's just that I think there was some talk in the community about the difference between calling something a vitamin and calling something a vitamer. Vitamin being the role that a chemical plays in this. So I understand that maybe part of where CHEBI is coming from is the use of that term.
If I can jump in here, Jessica's having a problem with her audio, so that is why she's typing. So we have the ontology, which has, let's call it, it's a very specific scientific view of how the world works. But the primary input that the everyday person sees of this is very much the label on the side of the box for nutrition. So do we have an integration point in between what the vitamin listing on the side of the box of a food box is and the vitamin in this ontology?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand the question.
Like if you get your box of mini wheats right now at the store, there's a label on the side of it, and it says this portion is 2% of your vitamin C intake for the day. That definition of vitamin C, how does it align with the terms in this ontology?
Yeah, so I think what we created was just to reuse, because so for example, in CHEBI, the vitamin exists, right? Like this a specific term exists in CHEBI. So we are reusing the definition from CHEBI, which in CHEBI can be a role in this case, but can also, like, some of the, if you look for a specific, I don't know, niacin, it will be a role as well. And it will be described or defined as a role. And if there are other ones that are, for example, this one here, it will be described as an entity. So I think that's one of the issues as well. And about, I think Jessica has a question about, is there a linkage between CHEBI terms and USDA labeling, the vitamins that you will see on a nutritional label at a grocery store? So what we did was just to create really the cross-reference with the USDA. So if you put, I don't know, USDA here, you are gonna see probably, well, we need some of the specific code numbers for vitamins.
Okay, so I'm just reading the comment from Naomi that food labels are governed by the FDA and not the USDA. From an operations standpoint, getting data from people, as well as putting the packaging and the labeling on the package, that's the language that commerce is going to want to use. And talking to people, that's the data you're going to get from them, because that's how they report to you what they're eating. So what I'm really asking is there any way to build a bridge from that labeling and that reporting into the ontology?
So I think, for example, just if I am understanding well, is we already associated some of the specific code numbers or tag names from InFoods and USDA into the Cdno for concentration of terms. So that's really the only way that we could create the linkage between these specific code numbers with the ontology. But USDA and InFoods don't have hierarchical classification of terms. They just have a list of terms that they describe as a food in the food composition tables. But there is no hierarchical way of definitions on it that we can reuse.
Yes, but I'm not asking you about the hierarchy. I'm just saying, when it says vitamin C on the side of the box, is there an alignment to a specific term within the ontology?
Yeah.
Yeah, in a sense, it's helpful. What this dietary nutrition component is going to reveal to people, which is that vitamin C can mean any one of 3 things, or vitamin B can mean any one of 10 things, but we'll have a mapping from vitamin B or vitamin C over to InFoods or to the USDA NDB nutrient. So that's helpful. But the CHEBI problem is that some of these are roles and others aren't, when what we would really like to reference is that whether it's a group of vitamin A chemicals or a group of vitamin D or whatever, that they're all material entities.
So if I could jump in here. Nice to see everyone, and I'm so glad you're working on this. This has been a problem in CHEBI for a long time. I think one of the answers to your question there, Damien, that you just posed is the fact that sometimes we have precise linkages between a vitamin name and a chemical, but sometimes we don't. There is no vitamin B. Vitamin B refers to a class of vitamins, the B6, B12, right? Niacin. So vitamin B is not a single vitamin. There
Yeah.
are B vitamins.
Yes, but that's the same when you go taking a look at the vitamin A and other definitions, they talk about in CHEBI a group of vitamins. So they're allowing that there's not just one chemical. They're allowing
But
a
it gets
variety.
even trickier.
Mhm.
Right now we have B12 as cyanocobalamin there, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But I don't see an entry for vitamin B12. There should be, right? So it says cyanocobalamin in parentheses B12. But in fact, there are many forms of B12. There's cyanocobalamin, there's holocobalamin,
Okay.
right? So
I get that. Then
there's
that's
another
talking about,
layer.
that's okay. That's good. That's good to identify, but that doesn't challenge the notion that these that B vitamin can be a group of chemicals, or just as
Right. Yeah, I
vitamin
saw
A
that
is
earlier,
defined
and
as that.
I just wanted to jump in. Yeah. So
Okay.
so
So in other words, I
certainly,
think what you're saying is there can even be more granularity here, and that's great. We
yes,
can work on that. But the
absolutely.
fundamental issue is this CHEBI one. If we can possibly knock into CHEBI's head that B vitamin can be treated as a material group just as vitamin A is, then that would be great.
Certainly it can. And as I'm saying, you can go one step further. Even B12, you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the names vitamin A, B, C, these aren't these, just go back in history a little bit. These are names that were given to things as nutritionists figured out, oh my gosh, these things are essential. We don't know what they look like, but when we don't give them to people, bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And right. So
Yeah.
we understood that their health status declined. And the role of the nutrition scientist in the 20th century was essentially to define essentiality. What are the things that you have to have in your diet? And that's essential amino acids, essential fatty acids, and essential vitamins and minerals. In fact, I don't see any groupings for those. And I think groupings around those would actually be super beneficial for like labeling, like Warren was just saying, right? So I do think that there should be something for that in food on that maps essentiality to these nutrients. In fact, one could argue that the term nutrient defines essentiality. There's a big argument for that in the nutrition and food science community. What is a nutrient even? But yes, there are groupings, and sometimes they are essential. Now, also, just to be clear, those essentialities are defined based on species, right? So what is essential for humans is not essential for cats, is not essential for dogs. And so if this is a broader food ontology that can apply to pet food, then we need to define essentiality for humans, for an organism. So I think those are all sort of critical ways that food on could be grouping terms that come from CHEBI, but CHEBI is lacking in its precision around how it's linking the term vitamin to specific chemical names.
Right.
It's gotten better, but still wanting.
Right. So I don't know if you got here at the start, Matthew, but this presentation is about approaching CHEBI to improve the vitamin A hierarchy. And it was following Liliana's presentation about Cdno as being a created ontology precisely to meet dietary needs. So
thank you, Liliana.
Right. So to that note, it probably won't be food on itself that defines this issue of essentiality. It'll be Cdno. Right. And what I would welcome you to do, Matthew, is add an issue to the Cdno ontology to address this essentiality question. But that can be a separate one, I think, at the moment from this vitamin one discussion.
So just, I know my question just derailed your presentation. I'm sorry. I'm a bad person. But it's just, I realize you're working with CHEBI. My only question is there an entry point from that other data source and representation into here? And it seems that we're not there yet. So Okay, please go ahead. I'll stop talking now.
No, we actually received feedback from people from Infoods, USDA Data Central, and Eurofear. So they actually provided their tables with all the different components. So based on that, we try to create some of the hierarchies that we think they represent the dietary and nutritional information in a better way. So there were some terms that we had to reuse from CHEBI because they already exist. We must reuse some of the terms. That we cannot create just terms, right? That's part of the OBO Foundry to make that specific part, and then just don't create terms that already exist. So we reuse terms, for example, vitamin C that already exist in CHEBI. We reuse some of other terms, carbohydrates and stuff. So in that way, we could create the hierarchies, but like according to a more specific dietary nutrition classification, because CHEBI has a lot of terms. So we don't really need all those terms because it's a chemical component, which is great. They have a lot of terms, but we wanted to make more like a normal, how you see it in a food composition table information. So that's how we became with this specific hierarchical structure, having all these different levels, but then it's now time to add more terms, maybe change the hierarchy of the terms. But like there is something that it cannot just happen for one person, right? We need the information for other people. We need people's feedback. And I think that's why we need, I was chatting with Lauren the other day, and we had this issue. I think for my PhD, I just kind of like just use ISA for all the vitamins, really. So you can see here that all of these ones are ISA relationship. I didn't reuse the hash rule relationship that is originally in CHEBI, because for me it didn't make sense. So we just reuse ISA relationship, and we can change that as well. They didn't have plant secondary metabolite, we added, and there are ways we can just ask CHEBI, and if they say, I don't think we need to add that term in CHEBI, then we can, if we as a nutritionist, we think that we need that term, then we can do it, or we can integrate that specific term in the Cdno. So that's one good thing that we can do, and reuse the Cdno to create terms that cannot fit in CHEBI, but can fit in the dietary nutrition ontology. So that's one thing we can also use, and also like just go back to CHEBI and then just ask them if they can probably change this or do that. But I think at this point, the vitamins is something that we need to fix. And if we can fix it all together, as Damien said, that will have more weight on it. I think I tried, and I think Damien tried as well. There are like at least 4 or 5 issues on GitHub about the vitamins. And I've been trying to follow that since like, I saw one from 2008 that you wrote, Damien, or someone else. And then like now it's 2021, but like it's time to probably try to keep moving this.
I see Naomi has her hand up. Is that current? And
yes, sorry about that. So I did want to support Matthew's comments as well as Warren's, and that, you know, one of the struggles, as you well know, Damien, and the rest working with us on FDC, we really are trying to transition from the use of the word nutrients and nutrient profiles in our databases, because there are many components in food that are also bioactive and important. And so if this effort could help us along those lines in terms of changing, you know, how food components are identified and strata, you know, or what hierarchy we might have. Because, for example, really ash doesn't contribute to a really nutritional role, right? Because all it is what's left after you combust it. And it's done and generated primarily because we have an inadequate way of really assessing what the actual energy composition of a particular food or item might be. Although we're trying to, improve on all of that. So, I think I like the idea of a material entity for many of these things, and then understanding the, differences between role versus, becomes extremely important, but could help us going forward, especially with respect to Food Data Central. And as I mentioned in response to Jessica's question, we tried, and as you know, toyed with the idea of using CHEBI terms for Food Data Central, and then ran into a roadblock because of how different groups use the information that we put in, in terms of functional effects versus biochemical effects, and so forth. Sorry to be so long-winded, but.
I think that was great.
Yeah, no, I think it's great feedback, and that after the release of the Cdno, I think that's what we expect, and I think this ontology can like grow more with all the feedback.
I have a question, Liliana, for you. I think I have two questions. I'll start with sort of the bigger picture question. You're called the Cdno, the Crop Dietary Nutrition Ontology. Does that mean you're not concerned with beef and dairy and animal, because they're not generally considered crops?
Yeah, sorry. So I think at some point during the presentation, I say that we started with crop dietary nutrition.
And I'm sorry for missing the first part. Yes.
No, don't worry. It's all good. So then we decided, actually just, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, Damien brought the issue of like, maybe we can use the terms from class concentration of, because that's only, so I'm just gonna put the presentation here.
Oh yeah, great.
This is specific class, and these terms are, for example, concentration of carbohydrate in plant structure. So these will be used to associate analytical, quantification of specific dietary nutritional components and associated to different databases. So that's what we were using, just plant structure. But like now, what we want, or like we actually describe to the OBO Foundry team, is to remove plant structure here in the design pattern, and then add the material entity term from FO. So in this way, the concentration of a dietary nutritional component in plant structure will be removed, and then we will add the material entity. So in that way, we can reuse it for table salt or associated to beef or any, or like fish, I don't know, like some other organisms. So in that way, the Cdno will change from crop dietary nutrition ontology to compositional dietary nutrition ontology, because we cannot change the prefix of the terms now. Like we have to still like have a C. So if you have more idea, that would be good. But I think we are gonna stick now with compositional dietary nutrition ontology.
No, I think that's great. Composition is perfect.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And I'm sorry I missed that. Thank you. Repeat it. And I'm sorry to everybody else for having to hear that again.
No, don't worry. That's all good. It's always good to just like just go through that again. That's
yeah,
fine.
the news things are just happening so fast now.
Can you? I'm so thrilled because Damien and other people at OBO have heard me sort of rail against the way things are in CHEBI in terms of vitamins and stuff. So I'm so glad that you've picked up this ball and are running with it. Can you go back to the vitamin A thing for a second, if you don't mind? I wanted to ask you something about that. The way you're representing vitamin A
in the spreadsheet.
I was actually just looking at the OLS, or is the spreadsheet more current than?
Yeah, we just added some of the terms there. Yeah.
Looks like those two are what OLS mentions.
Right. I thought I saw something where you had other carotenoids that you were matching to vitamin A, and I just thought that that I thought you were linking other carotenoids with vitamin A, and I thought that would actually be something that was worth talking about.
Vitamin A?
And yeah, I thought I did with other carotenoids, but maybe I'm wrong. I think there's similar issues with both okay. There we go. Right. So not all of those things are vitamin A, right? But it appears right there that they are. But really only carotene is vitamin A. And so those other things are related and the structures are similar, but you know, if someone's vitamin A deficient and you give them some of these other things, that's not necessarily going to do the trick. You might get some partial alleviations of vitamin A deficiency, but you're not actually going to be solving their problem.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be careful there. I mean, you know, it's super important to be precise here, right? Because if people are reasoning over this, it needs to be entirely accurate.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that for just one sec. So Liliana, it will be possible in Cdno to link directly from vitamin A to which one is it? Beta carotene? Beta carotene?
Beta carotene, yeah.
Right.
Beta.
So we'll be able to do that and avoid all of those others. But is that something that you guys can do, Liliana, or do you have something other reason to link to carotenoid as a child?
I think it was part of the when we were creating the cell relationship, because these ones, lycopene and xanthophyll, are carotenoid, but of course, as Matthew mentioned, I think they are not vitamin A.
Okay.
So it should be something in the design pattern or in the reasoning that we might need to change there.
So to go back to Naomi's comment and getting away from things like nutrient, if we can go back, and bioactivity I think is really, really important, right? So carotenoids all have similar bioactivities, okay? Excuse me, but only one of them is really essential, and that's beta carotene. So it'd be helpful, and I'm just saying something from Jaspreet that there are other in the chat. I hope you speak up there, Jaspreet, and chime in. But I think it would be helpful to talk about bioactive roles that these things are playing, and then essentiality. And having those as essentially classifications would be really helpful. And back to Warren's point and Jessica's point about the labels, I think that the labels are going to totally change once we actually are defining these material entities about the way they work, to Naomi's point about bioactivities. And when we can get to the point where we really understand the food composition's impact on the bioactivities of the person consuming it, that's really what we want to get at, more than is there X quantity of this one form of vitamin A or what have you. Does that make sense? And I hope you jump in, Jaspreet, because I think I'm guessing you're going to have something to say about vitamin A that will be quite helpful.
Yeah, when you say bioactivities is dietary, like similar to dietary functions, right, or not?
Bioactivity would be at the molecular level. So even sometimes at the genetic level, turning genes on, right? So you're actually you're essentially kicking off or killing specific biological processes, and tying these to biological processes and molecular functions in the gene ontology would be really, really helpful.
Could also assign, sorry, Jessica here with the construction finally stopped, so I won't assault your ears. But yeah, it also, you can tie in various symptoms to based on species to lack of a certain vitamin as well. So gene expression would be awesome too, but also maybe symptoms and like sicknesses that arise from a lack of a vitamin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's some of the things that we want to do with the dietary function as well. but yeah, like we didn't probably take into account more like at the level to like connect gene ontology, but we can probably discuss about that.
That would be a whole separate domain discussion, and I know some other people are interested in having that, and that would be, we could do a whole topic on that. For yeah, in fact, it's probably not just a 1 hour topic, it's like a half-day topic.
In fact, that you could conceive that would be yet another ontology. I mean, it would be something that you could put in here, but it wouldn't necessarily be the compositional aspect, right? It would be a bioactivity ontology, as it were. Whether that could be contained in one of these other ontologies, I don't know. But it might be something that would be interesting to be discrete, because it is a specific, I tend to, all these ontologies use terms from other ontologies as design patterns from dictate, but what you really end up with is, okay, I want this perspective of composition, or I want this perspective of bioactivity, or I want this perspective. And so depending on where you're sitting, essentially defines a new ontology. Even if maybe you're not adding any new terms, you're just adding new linkages and the way things are linked together.
I just, this is just Breathe. I just want to chime in one thing.
Yes.
Is that, the whole field of nutrition has kind of evolved, especially with the nutrients, in how we were looking at first at these from a deficiency point of view. I mean, as somebody just mentioned, that's how they got, discovered. So what that is important, but generally now looking at from a chronic disease point of view as to how these nutrients can, may have a role in preventing some of that. So that has come up with also with the dietary recommendations and that looking at dietary reference intakes. So it's a really evolving, it's ever changing. It's a dynamic field.
Right.
So Liliana and Lauren, getting back to actionable items on your vitamin hierarchy, perhaps show that hierarchy, the spreadsheet again. I think, yeah. So is it sort of agreed with everyone that we'd like a material class to represent vitamin B and the vitamin B group, the vitamin C group? And is it possible that we could approach CHEBI that instead of, they don't have to deprecate their B vitamin and their vitamin C, but maybe if we push for a B vitamin group and a C vitamin group, they could add an extra entity that would cover these things as material entities. And I'm saying that because ontology folks are very sticky about existing terms and making changes to them when they know they're being used out in the community. And so sometimes we have to approach them and say, can you add a new term that covers the material entity side, say, in this case.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable to me. That sounds good to everyone else.
Then we'll be able to have in Cdno the material jumping off point, and that won't that won't engender the stonewalling that we've had in the past about changing the existing terms somehow.
Yep. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen if that's okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and more discussion on that, because we can finish off the whole hour with that. More comments about it?
I did see some of, I don't know if this was a complete field, a complete list. I did see some missing provitamin carotenoids in the list. So just wanted to point that out.
So that can be handled in two ways. Either send Liliana an email directly about them,
Okay.
or add an issue to the Cdno board. And that's equally attractive from an ontology community perspective, because it shows that there's action and change happening as a result of community input.
I just want to make one comment to Jaspreet's comment, and about how this is an ever-evolving field and change. And I think it's important that we consider now and sort of looping in what Naomi was saying about getting away from this concept of nutrient, which has kind of, pigeonholed nutrition science in some ways, locked in by the vocabulary that they're using. So there's an opportunity now to make sure that we're modeling this at a very granular level that is correct and can evolve as the knowledge base evolves. I think that that's one of the big parts of ontology design patterns, is being able to do that. But I don't think that it's blocker in terms of modeling this field. In fact, I think it's actually helpful to understand how these definitions have changed over time in order to make sure that we model these things in a way that is evolvable.
I totally agree with you, Matthew. And I think we need to set these systems up so, because especially with this more evolving metabolomics studies, there are, what we are right now is just such a small portion of what the chemicals present in foods are. So this is increasing 100 and 1,000-fold. So we need to set up for those.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so what that suggests to me is that we could devote a whole session to the dietary function hierarchy. And then it becomes a question of whether the crop diet, the component dietary nutritional ontology wants to take on there, but that this discussion is pretty key to our whole ontology world. It suggests to me that we need at least a couple of hours to talk about that. So we could have a special longer session on a monthly call on the next month. Does that sound good to people, or is that just crunch in? I can send an email out about it, but if that collides with too many people's schedules, we might have to try to schedule it an hour earlier, or a 2-hour pattern.
So do we have, is there a as it were, a DFO for dietary function ontology? Is there a mock-up for this in existence so far? I think I saw in the chat, Lauren, that you've been modeling this out. Have you taken a stab at what that looks like?
Mostly at this point, I'm looking at trying to adapt Mondo patterns and looking at HPO patterns to try and integrate exposure terms, but I haven't looked into developing anything separate, just utilizing what we kind of already have. I work with the Monarch Initiative, so it's just trying to integrate most of our existing pieces there.
Right. So I think that there needs to be sort of that, what I would call higher level view, like I don't have this vitamin, I have this disease, but that doesn't really get at the mechanisms of what's happening. And so there also needs to be a much more granular view of what's happening on a molecular level. And then at some point in a really messy ontology, as it were, those things will meet in the middle. Does that seem like a reasonable approach?
Yeah, I think at this point, I'll be honest, my model has kind of a floating box that's like, there's some mechanism of action or something happening, but I don't have the perfect there's not like a perfect home where all of those terms lived. So it's kind of a, free floating entity at this point. And I've been trying to search through other maybe smaller ontologies that I haven't yet had a chance to like really utilize to see if anyone has this. But yeah, I'm kind of coming to a consensus that potentially they just don't exist yet, and that's another area that we keep developing terms.
For sure.
So it sounds.
So Chris,
Well,
I
it
was gonna say-
sounds, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Chris Mogul and I talked about this for, gosh, it must be years now, but both as a back burner thing that we need to be linking food components essentially to the gene ontology, molecular function, and all the gene ontology, essentially biological process, molecular function, and cellular location and anatomical. So it sounds like we're approaching a point where this is actually going to happen. And I think maybe starting with what your exposure ontology that you're developing there, Lauren, would make it more tractable. And then we can get into things like bioactive peptides and oligosaccharides and some of these other components that don't have as much historical scientific evidence.
Okay, so now I'm starting to reformulate what might happen through this joint ontology work group. It sounds to me like introducing the problem would be a good idea for an hour, but that this is a very more of a deep dive that may not be of interest to all of the different joint ontology groups. So we would have to explore who would want to be involved a bit more in this specific task, because it is so particular. It is tied to the gene ontology. So let's send out an email about that and to the group and figure out whether that should be a separate session. There are other joint ontology work group items happening already, including the ingredient one, which I'm reminded is kind of a priority to address, and that isn't happening with this genetic analysis. Doesn't need any of that. So in fact, I'm thinking maybe the next session should focus on the ingredients question, which was on the agenda. And then we do a side group to focus on this dietary function and bioactive food compound question.
Yeah, I think it merits its own group. Okay. And there will be plenty of people who will be interested in that. Probably, potentially even people who aren't in this call, if there's a wider call for people who want to participate in that.
Right. Okay, great. All right, well, thanks folks for this highly engaged session. And I look forward to talking to you all in a month.
All right, thanks Damien for hosting.
Yeah, thanks, Damien.
Can you just, don't kill it real quick. I want to save my chat here.
Oh yeah, okay.
Thanks.
Have a nice day. See you.
Okay. Bye everybody.
Thank you.
I'm good, Damien. Thanks very much.
Yeah, okay.
Take care.
Okay, will do.